A quick announcement while you're finding and opening up to Isaiah chapter 41 here this morning. Um, we are getting sort of everything put together inside that next portion, and hopefully soon we'll be able to open up for everybody to see. We just have a lot of stuff kind of scattered and thrown everywhere, and trying to figure out the best way to do it. Our rough plan right now, and I'll use a Chuckism, old Chuck Smith. Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be broken. Um, the I hope is that by Good Friday, that will be our first service in there, and then Resurrection Sunday, which is or isn't maybe a smart idea to be in there. But man, God is doing a lot of stuff, and God has been raising up people, helping and serving, and with ideas. And I'm just this last Friday and Saturday, I was here and just kind of like walking through, praying through, and it's just like, man, this is awesome. And then this morning, the worship team, we got together, and I was kind of going through a couple different things, trying to walk through some things, and I was brought up like, man, this is way different than the old living room. Years and years ago, it's like, yeah, better lighting. Man, it's crazy what God's doing. And so I will ask for this as we kind of get ready to move over in there. You can already see like everything is starting to be stripped down and pulled away. We're going to try to figure out the best way to be able to do that. It is going to be chaos, just like anything, where you invite everybody over for Thanksgiving and then they all show up. It's probably going to be some, have you ever had that moment where it's everybody, you're like, oh no, yeah, we're here. And you're like, oh my goodness, we don't have enough seats, and kids are eating in the bathroom and stuff. You know what I mean? Like we have enough room. We're just trying to figure out exactly how to do that. So just be very gracious. Things probably, I guarantee, will not work well. That's why it's a little bit scary to say, hey, let's do it, on the Creaster days, Christmas and Easter. Let's do one of the big Super Bowl days for the church. Let's do that. Amen. Yeah. But we're family, right? So we'll figure it out. All right. If you want to open up your Bibles to Isaiah chapter 41, how many people read ahead? Okay, good. So going through chapter 41 and 42 again, chapter 40 sort of launched us into the second section, and truthfully, the best way that we could do this was do 41, 40, 41, and 42. We just really don't have time to do that. There's not enough hours in the day, trust me, or the week to be able to get through some of this. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to overlap a little bit of last week. We're going to get up 41 and part of 42, and then we're going to come back next week and start pulling apart 42, because this really is this is the cream here, okay? We have sections in Isaiah like, chapter 8, chapter 43, the very end, 60 or 53, 66, some really powerful, amazing sections. But this is like time after time after time. And it should be remarkable because God is very candid. Again, Isaiah is a prophet of the first person. God says, I am or I will, more times in Isaiah than anywhere else in the Old Testament added up together. So God is very much, again, he'll use his name of intimacy, all the caps there, capital Lord, Jehovah or Yahweh, that name that he gave Moses at the burning bush. Man, I'm involved. I am what I am. How are we going to know what to do and how to do this? Again, Moses, probably like some of us, right, trying to plan all these things. Lord, how are we going to fit chairs in here? Where are the lights going to go? Where is this? All those sort of things that can give us ulcers and nausea and all that kind of stuff. And Lord says, I got it. I am that I am. I know that you're holding the world and salvation, Lord, but we need to figure out chairs. I don't think you understand how big of a deal this is. I'm using abstract illustrations, obviously, okay? But there is something about being able to do that. And as we walk through these sections, I'm reminded, David said, taste and see that the Lord is good. And there are many times where we begin to deal with or walk through or taste certain things that are not good, and it starts this perplexing issue or problem or quandary within our minds, right? And it makes seed within our hearts, and the next thing you know, we're just so confused and out of kilter, right, and unbalanced. And we looked at some of that last week where God says, man, I hold the world in balance. He can hold us in balance. But some of those questions of why, and just like, and I love how the Lord does this, because And somebody asked me a couple weeks ago, they go like, wow, why do you pick the really hard, long books? And I was like, we're just going straight through. Like we finished Esther on Wednesday nights, so now we're on Job. I didn't plan it that way. The Bible was put together that way, right? So we're in Job on Wednesdays, Isaiah on Sundays, but I love how they piece together, because if you ever read Job, right, the biggest question is why? Why, God? And I know nobody in here has ever said that to the Lord, right? That's first service, right? They're such weak Christians. They're like, why, Lord, why? But you read that and you walk through it, and it's not just Job or his friends or his wives, but everybody else is saying why. And I've heard some people say, well, God just says, why not? Man, it sounds like the Godfather, not God the Father to me, okay? But there's something in understanding, because God never answers the why all throughout Job. The questions are asked over and over and over again. Why? And it almost seems dismissive that God doesn't want to answer it, or that's what it seems like. But he answers in the fact that he says, Job, I know you just want to know why, you want an explanation, but I'm going to give you something better. I'm going to give you a revelation of who I am. And when you and I have a revelation of who God is, it puts everything again back into perspective. Okay, God, I see this and I see you. Because sometimes our vision is not what it should be, right? Earlier this week, I was staining some of the signs. And so I got here early and I wasn't sleeping well. And so I put out all these signs and I get the stain and I was like, man, I need some more coffee. So I go and make coffee. And I'm, got my earphones on, my death metal jazz or whatever it is, and I'm, anyway, it doesn't matter what I listen to, okay? Don't judge me. And so I'm listening to music, and I'm starting to stain, and the stain's looking kind of weird, and so I go and mix the stain and shake it up, and it's really not working well. I'm like, man, what's going on? And so I take a drink of my coffee, and I was like, man, this stuff tastes weird. Don't get ahead of me, okay? Don't lose my illustration. Because at like 5 seconds, you're farther than I was like 30 minutes later. I'm like, man, this tastes weird. And so, but I just keep going. And it's like by the 4th or 5th drink, I'm like, something is wrong with this coffee. So I dump it out, make a new thing of coffee. Drinking, all of a sudden, I'm like, the first drink is okay. The second one is like, something's wrong with this. Like, what is going on? So I start putting more honey in it, right? Because that's what you do. I'm going to push. I'm not a quitter. So if this kills me, I'm still going to drink it. So I'm putting more honey. I mean, it's getting so thick and so sweet that like I can like see the tunnel, the diabetes tunnel. You know what I'm talking about? And I'm sitting there and it's like, what is going on? And so I start smelling it. And I'm like, it smells fine. It tastes like coffee, but something's not right. And then as I'm thinking, I sit down and I dip my rag inside my coffee and then I pick up to take a drink at the same time and I realize, oh no. So if I have a hard time today, it's because I was consuming some stain for a while. But here's the thing. Have you ever like realized something? You're like, I can't be that dumb. Anybody else made that mistake in your life? You can't raise your hand for somebody else, dude, okay? But here's the thing. I pulled it up. I was like, okay, I must have done it once. There's no way I did it more than that. So I like start tasting it like it's the first food I've had in 100 years, I'm like, yeah, it tastes like stain with honey. And it looked the same. It smelled the same. By all other accounts, it was the same. But seeing and tasting are way different, right? And we can sort of transition through some of the things because God is going to go through the judgment here. He's going to go through these trials. He's going to say, I'm going to bring you to court, right? The first verse of chapter 41, God says, hey, make your arguments ready for all these things you put in the place of me in your life. And then let's walk through it. We're going to do it in public, though. I don't want to hide this. I have nothing to hide. Let's do this in public, and let's walk through this together, and let's try to reason together. Let's try to be able to see. Because sometimes we're calling things as if they are, as if they're not, and things that are not as if they are. Again, Friday, some guys working here, and I'm over here working in my office, and I hear these guys start talking about enchiladas and tacos and soup and caldo. And so, like, I'm hungry, right? Because I brought an apple and a banana with me. So I'm hungry, so I was like, hey, guys, what are you guys talking about? And they come over to my office, and Like, I was talking about our favorite food, Mexican food. You ever had any of that? And I was like, bro, are you kidding me? So we start talking a little bit about favorite foods, and like, oh, who are these people? I'm like, oh, it's my wife and my two of my sons and my son and my daughter. And they're like, the two blonde ones are yours? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, oh, that's cool. You call them yours. I was like, no, DNA wise, they are mine. And they're like, oh. They look at each other, and I'm like, no, I'm serious. Those are my kids. So we start talking, and I was like, man, I really love Mexican food. I was like, maybe sometime I should bring you guys some Mexican food. And they're like, no, we like authentic Mexican food. And I was like, bro, muy authentico, like I'm part Mexican. No joke, they look at each other, and they look at me and go, no. I was like, yeah, I am. Now, at this point, I realize now in telling you this story, I should have just said, it doesn't matter what they think, right? But I was going to die on that hill. So they start walking away because they're like, this poor guy's lost his mind. He's been drinking stain. Like, what's going on? And I was like, no, I am. I was like, give me a sentence. I'll translate it for you. And they're like, I took high school Spanish too. I can translate something, Donde es el baño? And I was like, no, like, give me like a real sentence. So they're like, no, it's fine. You can be Mexican. And one of the guys did this. You can be Mexican. So I go sit down. I'm like, Lord, I know I shouldn't be angry. But I feel like they're judging my character right now. They were here for like 6 hours. All day long, every 20 minutes I'd walk over there. And I'd be like, my last name's Lopez. And he's like, so? I'm like, what's a Mexican name? Is it? Yeah, it is. So I'm going to tell you something. It's got to stay here, okay? It's got to stay here. The guy's like, I'm just going to say you don't look Mexican. You have white kids. I mean, I don't know what else to say. You live in Montana. You're saying bro to me every second. And I went and got I have a huge sombrero in my office. I thought this would be therapeutic. It's not, because now I just feel stupid. I brought it out. I put it on. I was like, look, see? And he's like, nope, you still don't look Mexican to me. Why do I tell you this story? First of all, I want you to know, okay? You have to know that. The second side of it is there are times where like it doesn't matter how much. I mean, I could have gone through my phone. I'm like, look at my dad. Like, look at my grandma. I could have translated Spanish. I could have wore the sombrero. I could have done all this sort of stuff. He just didn't want to believe it because he didn't see it. And there has to come a certain responsibility for you and I this morning to be able to want to see what God is going to show us. Because you can sit here and we can go through it, and some of us can be blessed and go, wow, God, like there's these reeds that are bruised and painful and broken, and you don't just leave them alone. And part of us can say, well, I feel bruised and broken and weak, and I feel like God's left me alone. Or a smoking flax he won't extinguish, like he won't snuff you out. That's not who God is. Again, that's the Godfather, right? That's not who God is. So as we sort of walk through this, God has started chapter 40, and he said, I hold the whole world in its hands, right? I hold the stars. And I was reading a couple weeks ago about the Milky Way, and if you were to count every star within the Milky Way, right, in our galaxy, every star within the Milky Way, and you named one star every second, it would take you 2,500 years before you finished naming every single star in that galaxy. Right? And we have a hard time. We come in here and it's like, hey, you. What's your name again? Joe? Oh, there's no silent Q in that. Okay, that's different than I've heard before. I mean, we have a hard time remembering this stuff. God's like, I have no problem with that. I have no problem in understanding this. And again, remember, there's no chapter breaks as Isaiah was writing this. So God's Spirit is upon him, and he starts off saying this. He's going to deal with these idols that are on trial. Bring him into the courtroom. He says, keep silence before me, O coastlands or far off places. Here's what he says. Gather your arguments, okay? Gather your arguments. I want your best arguments. God doesn't want your B game or C game or D game. He wants your A game. He says, okay, if we're really going to do this, I want you to give me your best. I remember growing up playing basketball, and my dad was one of those guys just lucky, He would always do the like, no look, behind the back and somehow make it, right? Bounce off a car and a roof and a kid into the hoop, nothing but net. It's like, how? And I remember I was probably 12 or 13. And we played like 4 or 5 games in a row. And he's smashing me. And I said, okay, next game, winner takes all. And he could just see I was like deflated. So he's missing, and he goes, wow, you won. And at 12 years old, I was like, I know you let me win. There's no victory in that. So God says, I want your A game. I want your best game. I want to be honest and open. We're going to do this in front of everybody. So in this courtroom, first of all, he says, keep silent before me, O coastlands. Let the people renew their strength. We might even say, let's speak clearly and open. Take your time in giving your, dissertation of what you want to speak. Let us come near together for judgment. Let's make this open and let's make this public. This is not something I want to hide. Who? And you're going to see that who over and over again. Who raised up? He has these questions from the one from the east. Who in righteousness called him to his feet? Who gave the nations before him and made him rule over kings? Who gave them as the dust to his sword, as driven stubble to his bow? Who pursued them and passed safely by the way that he had not gone with his feet? Again, moving on to this, God is going to speak twofold here, and we'll look at these sort of prophecies that are here they're called past prophetic prophecies. And it's a fancy way of saying to God, all of these things are past because God is outside of time. But they're prophecy because there's still things that are going to be spoken in the future. What he's speaking here ultimately will deal with Christ, and we'll look at some of that next week. But there is the primary application for them during that time dealing with Cyrus. You remember King Cyrus is going to come in, he's going to conquer over the Babylonians, the Medes, and the Persians. He's going to deal with this. This prophecy is given 150 to 170 years before Cyrus. That's a long time. The story goes that Cyrus comes in for his coronation, and as he comes in, there's this old, wrinkly guy that comes in. His name is Daniel, right? D-O-D, Daniel of the Lion's Den, right? And he comes in and he says, hey, I want to show you something. God wrote about you. And in chapter here and in chapter 42, 43, and 44, Cyrus is named. And he says, God wrote about you. Before you were born, before your grandparents were born, God wrote and said, this is what would happen. It's to that point then that Cyrus is so amazed. It was such a remarkable, incredible thing to him. He let the Jews go back and start rebuilding the temple, establishing Jerusalem. So God says, let's talk about this. Now notice what he says here again in this prophetic past tense. All of these they've already happened. Who raised? Now this is 150 to at least 150, if not to 170 years before this happens. God says, who raised these things up as if it had already happened? Who called? Who gave? Who drove? Who pursued? Who has performed? He gives these sort of questions and he says, okay, I'll give you the answer. Look at verse 4. Who has performed and done it, calling the generations from the beginning? I, the Lord, the first, and with the last I am he. So Lord again answers his question. He says, I've done this, right? The first and the last. I, the Lord, Jehovah, the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega, we would say, right? Same phrase Jesus takes upon himself at the very end of Revelation. And there's countless things in Isaiah where Isaiah is saying, like, the Lord said this, and Jesus said, I say to you, I am the Alpha and the Omega. Wait, what? There's only one Alpha and Omega. How's that work? And you can go through Judaism and Bible scholars, and their minds are just as blown as ours can be. You know, that God is able to do so much, and yet he stoops down to us, and yet at the same time, we really can't fully understand. I was having a conversation with some young ones here recently, and they're just talking, like, well, where did God come from? God's always been. Okay, but before he'd been, where did he come from? He just always has been. And it's like at 40 years old, I still don't understand that either, right? My mind still melts. You ever tried to think on something, the Lord's like, take my word for it, and you're like, I'll reason this. And then you start getting a migraine and drinking stain, right? You don't know what's going on. I don't even have that excuse. I, the Lord, am the first, and with the last I am he. He says, the coastland saw it and feared, and the ends of the earth were afraid, and they drew near and came. So who controlled the past? Obviously, the Lord says, I did. Everyone helped his neighbor and said to his neighbor, be of good courage. So the craftsman encouraged the goldsmith. He who smooths with a hammer inspired him to strike the anvil, saying, it is ready for soldering. Then he fastened it with pegs that it might not totter. It's interesting what the Lord does here, because this is the section that there are sections throughout the word where we have like divine sarcasm, which seems kind of different, right? That God would do that. But he says, okay, smart guy, smart gal, I'm going to lay this out for you so you can understand. And you explain to me what your reasoning is here. He says, you take, the heathen nation or idols. Now, when I talk about idols, I know most of us probably didn't come in here with little shiny idols. You didn't hide it in your pocket when they greeted you at the door. But we can make lots of things idols, and they can be good things, right? This body can be your idol. I go to roots. And that could be the thing that you worship, or that could be your relationship with God is just being here. That's not going to stand at all. God said, "Which have no other gods before me." It doesn't mean in line or it doesn't. But God says, "I don't want any other gods in my sight." Period. So if you're going to do that, let's walk through this. And again, notice what he says here. Here's the divine sarcasm. This is what he says. This is what you're saying. It's ready for the soldering, and there's excitement in the way they're saying it. It's ready for the soldering. Then he fastened it with pegs that it might not totter. He says, "Oh boy, I'm super excited. It's soldering day. My gods have been toppling over, and I have to prop them up now. It's a good day they'll be able to stand up." And again, a good thing for us, man, if you have to hold up or prop up or solder down your God, probably not worth worshiping, right? That's God's role, right? To prop us up, to solder us, to give us a foundation. And all throughout this, God is going to get very intimate. He's going to get very real here with the I ams. He says, "But you," he gives us a contrast here. Here's his reply, "are my servant Jacob, whom I have chosen, the descendants of Abraham, my friend." Now, it's interesting because Abraham is the only guy that God calls his friend in the Old Testament. Right? The only guy, right? Not Honest Abe, but Father Abraham, right? You know the song. Father Abraham, God says, he is my friend. I thought about this. I'm like, man, you ever walk through a cemetery? Like, not at night, right? Because that's wrong. But like walk during the day and like read tombstones or headstones, and you just kind of like get ideas. I remember reading through, not like ideas, dude, not like that. Come on, guys. Are you kidding me? Some of you were like, what kind of church are we at? Ideas of what to put on your headstone. Come on. Are you kidding me? Wow. Okay. I'm the one drinking stain. Come on, guys. I was walking through reading these headstones. Those are the ideas I was getting. And there is this headstone that was out there, and it was just, the headstone basically said like, I was here and now I'm not. And I know that he probably meant it to be super profound, right? And he's probably like writing poetry, drinking some chai tea, and he's like, hey, I'm going to be here and now I'm not. And then I like look in the ground, I'm like, you kind of are still here. Like, I mean, practically. But I start thinking about what am I going to put on my, man, if I ever had a headstone, I would want like Julian, God's friend. Now, it seems kind of like a big thing to be able to say, like, man, how can we say that? I'm glad you said that. Keep your finger here. Skip over to John chapter 15 for a minute. Now, this would be blasphemy if I said this, right? But this is Jesus, part of the Godhead, God's one and only Son. Notice what he says here. Verse 15, he says, "No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you." Doesn't that just blow your mind? Like if you're washed in the blood, if you're one of God's kids, you're his friend. Now here's the other side of that, is how good of a friend are we being to God, right? Is it sort of the friend, like the Facebook friend, like we went to third grade together, I don't really know you. Oh, you're the kid that ate glue. Not me, the other kid, right? Or like, do we have a full friendship with him? And we're even on a whole nother level than that. Because not only that, but we also have the reality, he's placed his spirit, Jesus says he's placed his spirit within us that cries, Abba, Father. If we go to Israel today, Ima and Abba, right? Mommy and daddy. People still say that. Little kids running around. It's like if I gave up one of my sons, right? And to adopt another one. It'd be one thing to be able to give up a son to be able to take another son in. But what if I gave up one son, and then every time I heard that other son talk to me, my adopted son, I heard my son's voice? There's some power here. God has given us that spirit that we can call to him. Notice what he says here in verse 10. He says, fear not, for I am with you. We're going to see fear not in verse 13 and 14 too, but the central point here, right, is a primary point, is not just fear not. God doesn't say buck up, man up, woman up, right? He says, fear not, because I am with you. It almost kind of harkens forward to when Jesus is walking on the water, right? Remember what he says to the disciples? Fear not, it's what? It's me. It's just me, guys. Just walking on the water, no big deal. Fear not, for I am with you. Fear and faith, they counter each other. And all fear does is starve faith. I had mentioned something on a Wednesday night about having this. I was like, man, I've got this itch like on my neck and I don't know what it is. I don't have a rash or anything. Somebody who's well-meaning sent me this email, and it was the 7 signs of cancer, and they circled one, itchy neck. But I'd already had some stains, so I figured why not just read it. So I started reading through it. I had like 3 of the 7 signs. But I went on WebMD and found out I was fine. So it's okay. But here's the thing. We can live in fear, right? I know a handful of people that have died thousands of deaths before they die one physical death because of fear, because it chokes life out. Right? It strangles life. And he says here, this first primary challenge, he says, hey, don't fear because I am with you. David would say, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Man, when that's a reality of God's presence in our life, there should be no fear. And I'm not saying like you're going to start walking up and try to box grizzly bears. Please don't take me at that, okay? But I am saying this, when it comes to things of life, we either believe it or we don't. And I don't have this nailed down now, but I love the fact that God is going to repeat it over and over and over again. He says, fear not, for I am with you. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, I am your God. He's going to give us all of these I wills here. He says, I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. I will hold you. Not only that, I will help you and I will uphold you. He's saying here, hey, here's the confidence that you can have. You're soldering down your idols and your false gods so they stay here and they're solid and they have a foundation. You don't have to do that with me. Or we don't have to go before the Lord and go say, Lord, I hope you make it. Oh man, this world is pretty screwed up. I'm hoping that you can handle these certain things, that you can figure some of these things out. And he says here, I'm solid. He says here earlier, again, notice this, as he begins to walk through this, he's going to start speaking about being, I have chosen Jacob, who is, again, the conniver. I've chosen Jacob. It's interesting, Abraham is a friend of mine. He said, I'm calling these guys. He wants us to be able to put it all together, but I am holding on to you. Right? The strength is in God's hand. If you have kids, if you have little kids, you understand what he's saying here. Right? I'm the one, again, that's holding on. Your confidence is in my hands, not in your hands. One of the only times I ever physically yelled at my kids was when Caleb was younger and he ran across the street in oncoming traffic. And I was like, hey, hold my hand. He held my hand, was holding my hand, and then he just ran off. And I about had a heart attack right there. And I screamed, and all traffic stopped, right? And I'm grabbing him, and then I get super emotional. I'm like, you can't do that. I said, hold on to my hand. From that moment on, I started holding on to his hand. I didn't trust him to hold on to my hand anymore. And the point is there's strength. God's saying, there's strength in my hand. I know you don't have strength sometimes to hold on. So I'm going to hold on to you. Behold, and he's going to speak now primarily about some of the anti-Semitism that will come to Israel. But again, for you and I making application of this, he says, all those who are incensed against you shall be ashamed and disgraced. They shall be as nothing. Those who strive with you shall perish. When you feel like you're all alone, realize this, that you're not helpless. Or you might feel small and weak, but I'm there. You shall seek them and not find them. Those who contended with you, those who war against you shall be nothing, as a non-existent thing. Again, Genesis chapter 12, God makes a promise to Abraham, those who bless you, I will bless. Those who curse you, I will curse. God has never rescinded that promise, ever, ever. And again, you read through some of the old fathers, like Martin Luther, right? Right in the 1400s, the 15th century, and they get to Romans 8, solid stuff. You get to Romans 9, 10, and 11, and they short circuit. There's how can this be? How can this be? Because there is no Israel. So that's where all this replacement theology comes in. And even though Paul says stuff like, shall God cast off his ancient people? May it never be. Yeah, right, is basically what Paul says in today's language. Yeah, right. I'm oh, no, that's not Israel. This is speaking about the church here. And it fries some people's circuits. Now, I guarantee you, if they were here after 1948, they would be like, duh, that's what Israel is, right? Because most of us have said Israel has always been around since we've been alive. It's not some made-up sort of place or some made-up people. Hebrew is not a made-up language. And no matter who tries to eradicate God's people, God always protects. And you are always the majority with God on your side. You will walk past the ruins of the people that have tried to destroy you, always. Does that mean it doesn't hurt? No. Wars and rumors of war always hurt, but God is on your side. Notice, again, as he gets to the rest of this, he tells us why. 4 verse 13, I, the Lord your God, will hold your right hand, saying to you, fear not, I will help you. Well, maybe you're saying, okay, well, Lord, I don't deserve for you to hold my hand. Notice what he says to you in verse 14. Fear not, you worm. Okay, here's what he says. So you have no backbone, you find yourself on the dirt, you don't think that you're mine, or you don't have a place to be able to reach out to me. You're here too. Now, there's something about the Tola in Psalm 22, but very practically for you and I, fear not, you worm Jacob, you men of Israel. I will help you, says the Lord, and your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. I'm there. Now, it's interesting. He says, I will help you, says the Lord. And in the same context, adjoined to, and your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. The word Gael is there. It's 24 times in Isaiah's book. We translate the word Redeemer there, kinsman Redeemer. Now, sometimes we're like, why did Jesus have to come back in human flesh? That doesn't make sense. Why can't he just beat up Satan, take us home, right? But a kinsman redeemer had to be somebody that was related to you. It had to be somebody in your family. Kinsman redeemer could, if I was married and I died, my kinsman redeemer would take care of my wife and kids. I remember scaring my brother with that. He was just out of high school, and I was like, hey, if something happens to me, Laura's your wife now. And he was like, what? And I was like, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, because Laura was like, no. So anyway, he says, your Redeemer. Kinsman Redeemer, the other thing too is, they would be able to purchase back land. Revelation chapter 5, John is there, right? They're rolling out the scroll, the deed to the earth. John looks around heaven, the one place you'd be able to think somebody would be able to redeem the world with, right? And he begins to weep because nobody is found worthy at all. And he says, but then he looked and he saw the Lamb with the marks of slaughter that was able to redeem. Open up that scroll. He's the blood avenger. The kinsman redeemer was a blood avenger, right? Not the Marvel type avenger, but if something happened to you, somebody went out and murdered you, they were the only ones that were able to go back. God had permitted that to be able to find justice for you. Our kinsman redeemer has purchased back this world, right? Brought us into his family. Not only that, but he's been the avenger of death, right? He's an avenger of blood. He's had victory over death. Death, where is your sting? Where's your victory, right? Maybe the process of it we're not looking forward to, but man, I'm looking forward to being in heaven. The older I get, the more comfortable I get with that idea. Be able to see my dad and my grandma. Be able to see some of the people in this body that have gone on to be with the Lord. Have them show me around. I remember right before my dad passed away, we were talking, and my dad got saved in his 40s and just struggled with a lot of different things. And we were having this conversation, again, because at that time in his life, it was like every conversation becomes very real, right? Because you don't know if it's the last one. And I remember him saying, like, man, I'm really excited for heaven. I was like, don't talk like that. Like, don't do that around me, please. I said, no, but here's the thing. He's like, when I get there, like I'll probably be there for a long time before you get there. I'm going to show you all the cool places. I'm going to know way more than all the rest of you boys. And he was super stoked for that. And I was like, okay, Dad, when I see you, I'm looking forward to that tour, right? These tacos are good, but these ones are heavenly. Get it? Heavenly. All tacos are heavenly. That was a trick question. You failed, guys, okay? So, amazing again. That would have blown the Jews' mind. But he says here, verse 15, he says, behold, I will make you into a new threshing sledge with sharp teeth, and you shall thresh the mountains and beat them small and make the hills like chaff. You'll have victory. And you shall winnow them, and the wind shall carry them away, and the whirlwind shall scatter them, and you shall rejoice in the Lord, the glory of the Holy One of Israel. Again, all God's enemies, Pharaoh, Caesar, Nebuchadnezzar, Sennacherib, all of them. God has had victory. Now, this is going to mean a lot to the children of Israel when they are in exile, but God's going to start speaking again, these first persons. Listen to my heart is what he's going to say. The poor and the needy seek water, but there is none. Their tongues fail for thirst. I, the Lord, will hear them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will open up rivers in desolate heights, so in the mountaintops, and fountains in the midst of the valleys, and I will make the wilderness a pool of water, and the dry land springs of water. And I will plant in the wilderness the cedar and the acacia tree, the myrtle and the oil tree, and I will set in the desert a cypress tree and a pine and the box tree together. Here's the reason why, he says, that they may see and know and consider and understand together. That's what we should be doing today. Seeing and knowing and understanding together that the hand of the Lord has done this. The Holy One of Israel has created it. He says some remarkable things, and truthfully, we could probably camp out here for a long time. But he says, man, those that are dry and thirsty and weary, don't think I'm not going to involve myself in your life. He said that in the chapter before. Remember, you can't sit home and say, God's got other things to do that are more important than me. God says, don't put my name attached to that at all. What amazes me is, and it's written this way, God knows, he says, open rivers in the high places or in the mountains and fountains in the valleys. It usually is the opposite, right? You have a high mountain fountain and valleys have the rivers. God knows that. This is what he's saying. There's no restriction to the resources that I have. And I was thinking about this a lot this week, and I thought about, again, this is so much like my dad. We were talking about fanny packs yesterday. Why? Because, don't judge our family. And so we were talking about fanny packs, and I remember when I was a kid, my dad had everything in his fanny pack. Everything. I'd be like, man, I need some D batteries. And he's like, how many? And I'm like, how do you? No joke. I remember we were once at the park playing around. I was like, man, I'm really hungry. And my dad's like, I got some wrapped up burritos, and I'm Mexican, guys. I got this and I got that. I'm cold. I mean, he'd pull like one of those safety camping metal blankets out. He just had everything in there. And I become more and more like that the older I get. Right? I got jackets and snacks and everything everywhere stashed around my car and office. Because there's no amount of resources I don't have that I can't take care of you. And again, if we put it in perspective, God holds the earth. Of course he knows that we're hungry. He can fix this. Now look, he goes on, he continues on here. He says, now he's going to deal with the idols here. He gives this challenge. He says, present your case, says the Lord. Bring forth your strong reason, says the Lord, or the King of Jacob. So, hey, let's test your gods. Let's look at this. Let them bring forth and show us what will happen. Let them show the former things that they were. Basically, God's saying, let's see the origins. Let's see if they know what's going on beforehand. That we may consider them and know the latter end of them and declare to us things that come. So all of these things that have come again, and this biggest part of idolatry, God says, on the beginning and the end. Let's see if your soldered buddies can tell you what happened before time. Show the things that are hereafter, that we may know that you are gods. Yes, do good or do evil, that we may be dismayed and see it together. Indeed, you are nothing, and your work is nothing, and he who chooses you is an abomination, or literally has nothing. As if God is not clear enough, right? You are nothing, you have nothing, you provide nothing. Chapter 42, verse 8 and 9, we won't read them for time's sake. Chapter 44, verse 6 and 7. Chapter 46, 9 and 10. God says the same thing. Beginning and end and future. God's challenge is, take this into consideration. I was there before time as you know it began. Who is able to tell you when these things happen? Who's able to see into the future on these sort of things? And this is far above the psychic hotline or Edgar case or any of that. But we live in a society that always wants to predict things, right? Last night, setting my stuff up for the morning. Look at what it's supposed to be like today. It was supposed to snow and be like a high of 32, right? I got up and I was like, it looks pretty nice outside. First service, it was smoking hot in here. I turned on the AC. It was awesome. We can't even predict the weather, right? I mean, we could. They can't, right? It's the bitter root. Bring a jacket, bring some shorts. You're good, okay? But again, the most conservative scholars say that 27 to 30% of the Bible is prophetic. The more realistic, probably 45 to 50% of the Bible is prophetic. That's something we should be standing on. God says, I know this. I met with a young guy here recently. He's like, I'm really concerned. I got to talk to you. Hey, let's get together. What's going on? And he said, they're forming a one world power. And I was like, okay. He's like, the world's falling apart. All right. Certain people are in power that maybe shouldn't be in power. Okay. The church is being persecuted. Yeah. And he goes, I'm kind of confused because you don't see him as upset. Are you American? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, dude, it's all here. Like he said that's what's going to happen. I'd be more concerned if nothing that he said was going to happen is not happening anymore. So there's a proof that you and I have that we're able to see that. Again, all the players are on the chessboard. That should be part of our faith, is understanding that. He says, I have raised up one from the north, and he shall come. And again, obviously speaking, primarily he's going to speak of Cyrus, but on the other side of that prophetically, he's speaking of the Messiah, rising from the sun or from Persia. And he shall call on my name, and he shall come against the princes as a mortar, and the potter treads clay. One who declares in the beginning that we may know the former things, that we may say he is righteous. Surely there is no one who shows. Surely there is no one who declares. Surely there is no one who hears your words. The first time I said to Zion, look, there they are. And I will go to Jerusalem, one who brings good tidings. For I looked, and there was no man. I looked among them, and there was no counselor, who when I asked of them, could answer a word. Indeed, they are all worthless. Their works are nothing. Their molded images are wind and confusion. And confusion comes from where, church? Satan, right? Is the author of confusion. Now, there's no chapter break here when we get through this. So I want to do this. We're just going to get through a little tiny bit. Just stay with me. If we can get a little tiny bit of chapter 42, because we're probably going to take a couple weeks and try to walk through some of this, because this is a powerful section. Behold my servant, whom I uphold, my elect one, whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him, and he will bring forth justice to the Gentiles. Now, to the Jews, this would have blown their mind. Even though in Genesis, God said that's what's going to happen, this would have blown their mind, because they were thinking that God didn't care about anybody else. How can God care about these other ones? He will not cry out nor raise his voice, nor cause his voice to be heard in the streets. This one blows me away, because again, we're talking twofold here. Primarily, we're talking about Christ. But he says, hey, in contrast to this idol serving you, right, and how it's taking care of you, look how I'm serving you and what my servant does. He says things like his voice will be heard in the street. He will not cry out nor raise his voice. We have that all throughout the word where, Jesus does that. The one that always comes to my mind is, again, the very end of the Feast of Tabernacles, an 8-day feast. The 8th day, every day they take, for whatever day it is, a jar back and forth from Gihon to Siloam, back and forth, and the priest would pour out the water to symbolize the water that was poured out from the rock in the wilderness, right? That rock that followed them, which still is another part of the story we won't get to. How did they know, right? I mean, that rock, anyway, we won't get to it. But that rock follows them. The 8th day was a day of silence. 8 times back and forth the priest would go, pour out water, and people were supposed to be silent, giving God thanks for the water he'd poured out. And remember what happens? It says on the last day of the feast, Jesus cried out with a loud voice. Now, that's a biblical way of saying Jesus screamed, right? Because you can cry out or you can have a loud voice. When you cry out with a loud voice, and he says, if any man thirst, let him come to me. And out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. And everybody's looking at Jesus going, is this guy new here? Like, this is silent time, dude. This is not talking time. But Jesus is saying, you guys are giving God thanks for this water that provided sustenance and refreshment for you. I'm here. Now later on, Paul's going to say, Christ was that rock that followed him in the wilderness. But they didn't know that. And then the amount of times that we see this, again, always comical to me, Jesus will heal somebody. He'll say, don't tell anybody. What's the first thing they do? Tell everybody. He'll say, go out, tell everyone. What's the first thing they do? I'll pray about it, Lord. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Speaking about that, now notice this. This is where we'll end up here. He says, a bruised reed he will not break, a smoking flax he will not quench. He will bring forth justice and truth. He will not fail nor be discouraged. Literally, he won't be broken down till he has established justice on the earth, and the coastline shall wait for his law. Real quickly here, he says a few different things. First of all, he will not fail, right? He won't break down. You ever had a vehicle that you were scared was not going to make it? Right? You get there and the whole time you're just like, come on, baby, 2 more miles. And it gets there and you're fine. And then you realize that you're going to have to leave. And all of a sudden that worry comes on and you're like, oh, come on. You can make it home, please. And then it starts to sputter and you're like, come on, you can do it. Guys, I'm not like that. I'm not a jalopy. I'm not broken down, okay? But then he says this, and this is powerful. We'll pick up on this next week. He says, a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoking flax he will not quench. A bruised reed was a reed that had been blown over or brushed over and had a weak point or a stress point. So it was used to falling over, and God says, don't think about me that when you're broken or you're in pain or you're afflicted, that I like seeing you topple over. That's abusive, right? That's the Godfather. That's not who I am. I do not take pleasure in that. When you fold over or are hurt or you feel weak or vulnerable, but he said, I will heal that. Right? He's tender in those moments. The smoking flax, if you've ever had a fire and it begins to go out, right? You begin to blow to get it back going. God says, I'm going to breathe on this. I'm going to keep this going. I'm not going to quench it. The word there is extinguish. Luke chapter 4. We'll end here with this. Jesus says this, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to bind up the brokenhearted, to set the captives free, to open up the prison doors, and to heal the blind eyes. That's how God saw power. Jesus, right before the Last Supper, he says, when all power and authority had been given unto Christ, he took off his robe, knelt down, and washed the disciples' feet. That's a different way of seeing power than I see it. Because, man, you know the most powerful thing to me? I can take care of my kids. But if you're a parent, you understand that, right? You don't need accolades from anybody, but man, when your kid's like, oh, thanks. There's so much here. We really could go on for hours and hours. Luke chapter 15, it speaks about the parable of the lost sheep. We sang about it this morning. He'd leave the 99 for the one. Don't let anybody ever tell you, don't let Satan try to lie to you and say that he cares more about the group or the sheepfold than he cares about the individual sheep. That's a lie. It's like saying I care more about my kids corporately than just one. If I take care of the one, corporately they're fine. God says, I'm not into breaking things that are fragile and broken. That's not who I am. When you feel extinguished, when you feel like you have no breath left in you, I'll bring that back to life. Please read chapter 42. Hopefully next week we'll get through some of it. We'll start breaking it down. It really is such an awesome section to be able to get through. Amen? All right, let's pray. Lord, thank you just again for your word. Thank you so much for the gift we have to be able to walk through it, to be able to see your hand in our lives. And I thank you for just loving us. I thank you that you would do all of this for each one of us individually. Lord, and that you would leave the 99 for us. We could sing about it, but I really still can't comprehend the depths of that. Lord, for some of us that feel vulnerable and broken or weak or in pain or feel extinguished, I thank you that your words are not toughen up or get over it, but that you promise that you'll meet us there. And in those times, maybe the whys are not answered, but most definitely the who is answered. And the fact that you would grant us deeper revelation of yourself. Lord, in the same way that John is saying, why? Why is all this happening? And then to see, Lord, you there with the marks of slaughter upon you, saying, here's why, the revelation of me. And all things come into perspective when that becomes our reality, Lord. So may that become our reality. Thank you again for this family. Thank you again that you've called us your kids. We don't deserve that. But help us to walk in that same way, Lord. And for some of us that feel like we're worms and there's no backbone and we're in the dirt and we don't know where to go, we're squirming. I thank you that your word is the same. Fear not. We love you, Lord, and we just ask that you'd be glorified in our lives, and we ask all this in Jesus' name. And all God's people said, amen. God is good, amen.